9.5 million people wake up tomorrow with jobs that won't exist in 15 years. The CEO who employs them just admitted he has no idea what they'll do next. Here's what he said behind closed doors that changes everything. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel is about understanding the forces shaping your future before they catch you completely off guard. And what we're covering today is one of those topics that most content creators either sensationalize or completely avoid because it makes people uncomfortable. But I'd rather give you the truth than keep you comfortable. So let's get into it. Here's the thing about the job apocalypse conversation. Most people think it's happening in some distant future. They picture the year 2050, flying cars, robots walking the streets, and maybe they'll need to update their resume. But the CEO of one of the most powerful labor platforms on the planet just sat down for a candid interview and said something that should wake every single person in this audience up from that comfortable sleep. A consumer car available to anyone who can afford one, doing what professional drivers get paid to do. Uber isn't just a car service. As a company, it is one of the single largest organizers of flexible work on the entire planet. We're talking about 9.5 million drivers and couriers. 9.5 million people who wake up every single morning and rely on that income to feed their families. That's not a small number. Apparently, the only workforce larger in the world is the Chinese military. Let that number sit with you for a second, because it becomes very relevant to everything we're about to discuss. Now here's where this gets interesting, and honestly, a little scary. And it's the conversation this entire video is built around. Statistically, that car drives more safely than he does as a human. We're not talking about theoretical future safety. We're talking about actual, measurable, current reality, where the machine already outperforms the human being sitting in the driver's seat. And if that's where we are right now, in 2026, then let's talk about where this is going and what it actually means for those 9.5 million people. But here's the part that made his face change during the interview, and it's not what you think. The real crisis isn't about money at all. The real issue is the question of meaning. He said, "Look, I don't think this is a catastrophic problem in the next 5 years. But beyond that 5-year window, the disruption becomes something that society genuinely doesn't have an answer for yet." When tech executives go on CNBC, when they stand at the podium at Davos, the message is remarkably consistent. Everything will be fine. New jobs will emerge like they always have. History shows we adapt. Don't worry. And here's the thing. Part of that message might even be true. History does show that humans find new forms of work when old ones disappear. The agricultural revolution pushed people toward factories. The industrial revolution eventually pushed people toward knowledge work. So the argument has historical merit. But the CEO in this conversation said something that cut right through that comfortable narrative. He said that when he hears about the private conversations happening among technology leaders, the picture they paint is drastically different from the one they share publicly. In private, these people are anticipating a level of disruption that is almost incomprehensible. And then they go on television and say, everything will be fine. Why the gap? Think about it from their perspective. If you're a technology company raising billions of dollars, if you're trying to recruit top talent, if you're trying to get regulatory approval for your products, if you're realizing this is way bigger than what you're hearing in mainstream media, hit subscribe. I'm breaking down the conversations that actually matter every single week before they hit the headlines. Autonomous vehicles are the clearest case study we have for understanding how AI displaces human labor. And the timeline being discussed by people inside the industry tells a very specific story. Right now, we have Waymo operating in cities like Austin and Atlanta. And by every available measure, those vehicles are already safer than human drivers. Not comparable, safer. The human being in the equation is now the backup system, not the primary operator. Think about that role reversal for a moment. The human is there in case the machine needs help, not the other way around. The holdups that remain before full autonomous deployment are not technological limitations in the traditional sense. They're regulatory, they're physical infrastructure, and they involve getting the sensor technology and the models to the point of genuine universality. But these aren't insurmountable barriers. They're delays. Speed bumps on a road that leads to a very specific destination. Stay with me here, because what I'm about to show you explains why every solution being proposed right now is missing the point entirely. Every previous wave of automation in human history has disrupted one type of labor at a time. The Industrial Revolution disrupted physical, repetitive labor. It was difficult. It caused real hardship, but knowledge work remained a refuge. If you could think, if you could analyze, if you could create and decide and strategize, you had a place in the economy. What's different about this wave of artificial intelligence is that it's coming for both categories simultaneously. The autonomous vehicle threatens the physical worker. The large language model and the AI reasoning systems threaten the knowledge worker. The lawyer researching case law. The analyst building financial models. The programmer writing code. The radiologist reading scans. Both types of labor, both traditional refuges, are under pressure at the same time. That's genuinely unprecedented in human history. And that's why the question of what happens next is so much harder than it was in any previous technological transition. This is profoundly important, because it means that even if we solve the economic problem of job displacement, which we haven't, we would still face a meaning crisis that no check from the government can resolve. When we discuss job displacement, the conversation almost always centers on economics. How will people pay their rent? What will unemployment look like? What's the GDP impact? These are real questions. But there's a deeper question underneath them that the CEO in this interview connected to something very personal. His father came to America with hope and ambition, built something, and then lost it. And what the son observed wasn't primarily financial devastation, though that was real. It was the loss of meaning, the loss of the sense that you are providing, that you are valuable, that your existence creates something in the world that matters. There was a study mentioned in this conversation, an Australian study that analyzed letters left by men who had taken their own lives. And the recurring sentiment wasn't despair about money or circumstances. It was a feeling of worthlessness, specifically, the feeling that their family would actually be better off without them. That is what happens at the extreme end of losing one's sense of purpose and value. And this connects directly to the universal basic income debate, which is the solution most commonly proposed when people talk about AI-driven unemployment. Just give people money. Let the robots create the economic value and distribute it as income to humans who no longer need to work. The people who get displaced first are the ones who ignore the technology entirely. The people who thrive are the ones who become skilled at deploying it. Let's start with the individual, because that's where you have the most control. The advice given in this conversation to his own children was simple, but counterintuitive. Don't plan too rigidly. Stay curious. Let the world change you before you try to change the world. And that might sound like soft wisdom, but there's something genuinely strategic embedded in it. People with extremely rigid career plans develop a kind of psychological tunnel vision. They're actively looking for signals that confirm their chosen path and dismissing signals that contradict it. In a stable world, that focus is an asset. In a rapidly changing world, that same focus becomes a liability. Because the opportunity you didn't plan for, the skill you haven't thought about, the industry that didn't exist when you made your plan, these become invisible to you precisely because you're so committed to seeing what you expected to see. The people who navigate disruption best are the ones who remain genuinely open, not directionless, not without ambition, but open. Willing to receive input from the world as it actually is, rather than filtering everything through a predetermined narrative about where they're going. And both of them might be partially right and partially wrong. The actual outcome depends on decisions that haven't been made yet, on technologies that haven't matured yet, and on social and political responses that haven't been designed yet. Mass retraining at scale. Not retraining as a government program that sounds good in a press release, but reaches a tiny fraction of people. Genuine, large-scale, technologically enabled retraining that can help millions of people develop new skills quickly as old categories of work disappear. There's an interesting irony here. The very technology that threatens jobs could be the same technology that enables this retraining. AI tutoring systems, personalized learning at scale, accessible to anyone with a phone. And actually, the Uber CEO mentioned that they've already started moving in this direction on their platform, creating opportunities for people to train AI models and contribute to knowledge-based work using just their phones. It's a small step, but it's a preview of how the transition might actually work in practice. The companies and countries that figure out how to build effective retraining systems will navigate this transition far better than those that don't. And right now, nobody has cracked it. Let me come back to something that I think is the most psychologically honest part of this entire conversation. The admission that there isn't a clean answer. Subscribe so you're never caught off guard, and click that video right there. It's the next piece of the puzzle you need to see. Don't wait. Click it now. The people who are sleepwalking through this moment, who are waiting for someone else to figure it out, who are trusting that the same public optimism you hear from executives on television represents the full and honest picture. Those people are taking an enormous risk. The people who are paying attention, who are building adaptability rather than rigid career plans, who are developing skills that complement rather than compete with AI, who are having honest conversations with themselves and their families about what this transition means. Those people are positioning themselves for whatever comes next. Your job might not disappear in the next 24 months, but the landscape around it is shifting faster than most people realize. And the difference between being swept along by that shift and actually navigating it comes down to whether you're paying attention right now, in this moment, before the disruption fully arrives. The cars are already driving themselves. The question is whether you're in the driver's seat of your own future or just along for the ride. The shift is already happening. The question is whether you're preparing or pretending it won't affect you.